On this week's Physio Foundations podcast, I'm going to have a conversation with new graduate physiotherapist and another one of my former Monash Uni physio students, Jun Soong, about transitioning from university to working life. We're going to talk about planning overseas travel as a health professional and why he's going to go back to university to study a master's degree, amongst many other things. Welcome to the Physio Foundations podcast, a podcast about the knowledge and skills that provide the foundation of expert clinical practice. So this is part 8 of my new graduate series of episodes. And so if you're a health profession student, a physiotherapy student, or a newly graduated practitioner, this episode is particularly for you, or especially for you. But likewise, if you're working with new grads, you're working with students, you're interested in higher education, you're interested in mentoring new graduate clinicians, or even making a career change yourself, this episode is going to be for you as well. So like I've said before, everyone's welcome here. And the podcast is really about the foundational knowledge and skills in our profession, but also the stories that make up people's foundations and the relatable stories and career transitions, and that what makes up the foundation of your career. So it's all about sharing positive messages about our profession and supporting and challenging each other and helping each other develop and grow. So I've got a really interesting guest today, a former student of mine, Jun Soong. So Jun, welcome to Physio Foundations.
Hi, Luke. Thank you for the introduction. Like we discussed earlier, I've been a listener to this podcast, especially the new grad series. It's been interesting to see what everyone's been up to. So hopefully I can share a little bit of my insights as a new grad and contribute to this series.
I'm sure you will. One of the things is when you first start a podcast like this, you're going to be sampling from people you know first, and then you broaden that conversation out. So we've had one of our 7 episodes has been a non-Monash Uni graduate, and a lot of the graduates have been in your year level from
Correct.
2000. That's okay. So Josh is a friend of yours who was in a previous episode, Josh Vinton.
Correct, yes. And he's a colleague of mine as well. We actually worked in the same place, but now we're moving on to our next phases of our career. So it's interesting to see what he's up to, and hopefully I can share a little bit about what I'm up to as well. I
probably wouldn't have set up a Zoom to come and talk to you about these things. I might have seen you at a conference. I may have seen you in the local area. Hi, Jun, how you going? Good to see you again. So this is really a really good opportunity to reconnect and then to share the reflections that we're going to have on what you did in university, and that particularly those challenges and your tips for how you would, what you would mentor others in terms of transitioning from university to working life. So it's a really good opportunity to do that. And I'm really happy that you emailed me, or you sent me a LinkedIn DM. Yes. And you said, hey, I'd like to come on, because I keep leaving that open for people who want to come on. I've had a few people who have been referred. Mm-hmm. So Oliver Wong was on last time on the new grad series.
Yeah.
Ollie was referred, hey, this would be a really good guest. So I contacted him. So if you're out there and you're listening to this, if you're finding it valuable, and this is a conversation that just continues on from person to person and over time, and we're going to keep it going for a long time. So if you feel you have something to add here and you want to contribute your perspectives and be on the podcast, be brave. Send me a DM like Jun did. So let's talk about you. Let's start with your background and interests. Who are you? What do you do? What are you interested in? And where are you working, etc.?
Of course. So just a quick summary about myself. Graduated in 2020, as with a lot of other guests in the podcast so far. I've always been interested in musc physiotherapy and sort of knew quite early on that I wanted to do private practice physio, hence why I went straight to private practice. My first role was up in regional Victoria, which was quite interesting. I worked there for a year as a private practice musc physio before I transitioned back into the city, where I continued to work as a musc physio in private practice, where I'm currently practice at Peninsula Sports Medicine Group. But concurrently, I'm also working as a casual physiotherapist at the Alfred and also as a community physio. So I do have a number of jobs at the moment, which just makes my job that much more interesting, I guess.
Oh, yeah. So you're doing community health, hospital work and private practice work. How do you find jumping between those roles on different days or even on the same day?
Of course. I personally, as much as I enjoyed private practice physio, as a new grad, it was quite tiring.
Oh yeah.
It takes a lot out of you. So in the second year, I decided to break up my week. I knew I still enjoyed private practice physio, but I really did not want to burn out. So I broke up my week by doing private practice stuff, community stuff, and also working at the hospital. So it breaks up my week in the sense that I get something different every day, and also it keeps me engaged in that sense.
Mm. And what are the differences that you found between working in the country and working in the city as a physio?
In the country, there isn't as many physiotherapy practices as you would find around the city. So when I was in my first job, and I didn't have it as bad as the other regional guys, but our diaries were full from day one. And I remember on the very first job, my diary was probably 70 to 80% full, and it was very full on. So in that sense, it was much more hectic in regional compared to city. That was the first difference. The other difference as well is the patient presentations. You get a lot more sport presentations in the city compared to regional, where there happen to be a lot of worker compensation claims and TAC injuries compared to the sort of sporting demographic you get in the city.
I'll just explain TAC for the listeners who aren't in Victoria. So this is Transport Accident Commission. So these are road accident compensable people paying for that care, and then workers' compensation. Yeah. So different type of patient presentations is an interesting one for people to think about when they're considering where they may go. So, but you learn from working with different people. You learn different
100%.
things. It's good to have that contrast.
That's right. And I guess a lot of people ask me, did I make the right decision by going to regional Victoria for my very first job? And I would say, yes, I wouldn't regret it, because, to be honest, I was sort of forced to really think on the spot. And because of that, I became quite independent as a physio quite quickly.
Okay.
And as a result of that, I reckon my transition back to the city as a physiotherapist was made much easier because of the skills I developed in regional Victoria.
What were some specific skills that you picked up that you may not have had that opportunity in a metropolitan environment?
Yeah, of course. One of the main things was communication. The people in regional Victoria are extremely friendly there, which made my job much easier. But because of that, I managed to develop my own communication style, which has helped me with my transition back to the metropolitan area, essentially. So communication is one very important thing as a private practice physio, which I feel I managed to develop the skills back in regional Victoria.
Can I explore that a little bit more, even though we had an original plan for what we were talking about, but that always goes straight out the window, doesn't it? So what specifically was it about the communication that you developed? What were the challenges in communication? What were your strategies for talking to people and making those connections and getting the information you need?
Of course. Because of the vast variety of presentations in regional Victoria, you've got your work cover, TAC, we had NDIS as well, and you have your private paying patients as well. You really had to vary your communication styles between each one of them in order to develop that rapport you get, that patient relationship you get with each one. Because as a private practice physio, that's quite important for making sure they come back again. So that's a very good opportunity in regional Victoria for you to be exposed to these different type of patient presentations, which will help you with your transition anywhere else, in my opinion.
Are there more opportunities for work? Generally, we're only talking about one state in one country.
Yeah.
But are there more opportunities to work?
Definitely.
In regional areas?
I would say so. And with the growing population in regional areas, I found during COVID, there was a big influx of people moving into South Gippsland, which I was based off. As a result of that, being the only physio clinic there, our diaries filled up very quickly. And over my time there as well, I have noticed new physio clinic pop up, the new hospitals popping up as well. So there's always new job opportunities there, if you're willing to move to regional Victoria, which some people aren't.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's pros and cons of everything, and there's opportunities there that you mentioned. You did say an acronym before, an abbreviation, which was NDIS, which is our National Disability Insurance Scheme. So, and every country has different, different schemes and everything. But generally, what you're talking about there is there's private paying patients in some systems. There's people who are receiving their care paid for by some sort of compensation and some sort of scheme. And then it was interesting, you mentioned that there are potentially different types of people that you work with in those different, just classified by the different schemes there. And of course, there's different types of people everywhere, but that was an interesting point.
Yeah.
So tell us, so that's quite a challenging job for a new grad, isn't it? You not only were you busy, you had lots of different types of clientele and people you were working with, and you had to really extend your communication skills and learn all these new things. What were the struggles that you found, and we could talk about the good things about it as well, but what things did you find difficult, and where did you really target your energies initially?
Oh, of course. I would say as a private practice physio, especially from a new grad perspective, a lot of the presentations we see in a private practice setting, we don't cover very much in depth in uni. In uni, I would say, and this is not a criticism, but
let's discuss it. This is good.
Yeah, I felt that in uni there was a huge emphasis on a hospital setting as a hospital physiotherapist. I guess our first year was predominantly musculoskeletal, but the remaining 3 years covered quite a lot of hospital content. And naturally, as a new grad, having spent only the first year focusing on musculoskeletal presentations, it was definitely a challenge coming out of uni doing that. So that was probably one of my biggest challenges in my first couple of months as a private practice physio. However, you learn on the job very quickly, and because you're put into that situation, you actually know more than you think. So you got to trust yourself on that. But my advice on new grads or even people in uni at the moment, although we only spent the first full year doing predominantly musculoskeletal content, I'd say you get as much as you put into it. You know, the uni gives a good foundation into these sort of knowledge, but you can always do your own research and also do more work into it yourself, which helped me a lot when I came out, because that's what I did. I listened to podcasts, I watched other resources, read into research papers. These are things that uni don't really make you do, but I would recommend you doing, because it helps you. It helps you a lot when you leave university.
Yeah, you've hit on a really important point there that, well, no one can really make you do anything in the free world, but so you've got lots of opportunities. And I guess when you graduate and you're in your position, you're really incentivized to go and learn. Correct. And you're motivated, and you're running your career and you're getting paid and you're putting your professional reputation on the line every time you go to work. So there's lots of motivation and incentive there to go and learn. And also, hopefully, most people, main motivation is they want to help people as well.
Of course.
That's the main thing. You've got someone there with a problem, you want to help them, and then that leads to you learning as a secondary thing. But so let's dwell on that a little bit, that experience in university. Can you put yourself back in your mindset in first year when you were learning about the most common musculoskeletal presentations of people with a total knee replacement, total hip replacement, or those types of presentations you'd see in a hospital?
Correct.
Can you, how much space in your brain did you have left to learn about many more conditions
Yeah,
and to explore in more depth, because sometimes the experience we have with our first year students is they're on the edge of they've got stressed and they've got a lot of knowledge and they're learning a lot of
definitely.
stuff there in first year.
Definitely.
So let's go back to first year and have a think about comparing that to what you know now.
Of course. I think for myself, and I may not speak for everyone, but I was very interested in the musculoskeletal content, which helped with my, I guess, motivation to learn more. And there was a lot to fit in first year in terms of content and anatomy and things like that. But like I said, the university gives you a very good foundation, a very good start as to what you should know as a musculoskeletal physiotherapist. And the rest is essentially up to you as to how much more do you want to know. And like I said, it's a lot of content, and I don't blame others out there who that's enough in their brain to fit in, because it's a lot. But I would say I would definitely encourage people who is looking to transition into private practice physio to do a lot of your own study as well on top of that.
Yeah, and you have to. You'll either figure that out the hard way or the easy way. And so you're someone you've said you really enjoy the musculoskeletal practice. You've got a passion for it. That's going to feed into motivating you and getting in the discipline to go and read the papers and do the extra reading and everything.
Exactly.
So you've got you get a good foundation in the basic foundational content in university. What about the processes? What about how you learn? What would you do differently? Thinking back to first year in terms of maybe nothing. Maybe you were quite happy with your approach in university, but perhaps a better question is, what are some tips you could give first year and second year students who are in those foundational years in how they approach learning, beyond just content that you might get from additional readings?
Of course.
Things. How do you study? How do you think? How do you approach it?
Yeah. From my first year perspective, and everyone learns differently. I personally learn better taking notes and reading textbooks and things like that. Other people are more visual learner. Other people learn more from doing practicals, etc. So on that point, everyone learns differently. However, I would say Monash itself gives a lot of opportunity for students, especially in the first year, to practice their practicals and ask questions in lectures and things like that. So definitely make full use of all those opportunities. They're out there for you to learn. So do ask questions in lectures. We have a lot of very smart physios coming in to teach us this. So make full use of it. Even in practice for practicals, we've got physios there as well to help us there. So make full use of all the resources available in first year to get the most out of it, I would say.
That's great advice. What if you're a bit embarrassed or afraid to ask a question? Can you talk to often the questions come from the same people.
Yeah, of course. I would say I was one of those. I don't think I ever asked a question in university.
Really? I remember talking to you a lot.
Oh, did you? Probably.
I think it was a lot of that would be in practical classes, going around and let's fine tune the way handling of this, or your the feedback you're seeking from. So you might have had your hands on the person doing some sort of a technique or going through an exercise, and a lot of it would be that feedback of what you're doing in those prac sessions.
Yeah.
You don't reckon you ever asked a question? Asking a question with 100 other peers, especially young, especially in the environment of a big Zoom meeting or a big lecture theatre, that's tough. I get it.
Yeah. I don't think I ever did it in such a big setting, but probably in person I was less afraid to do so. But no, there's no reason not to. All the lecturers are extremely friendly, like yourself, Luke. So don't be afraid to go ask a question.
Because it's not about knowing preempting the answer and being clever enough to ask the question that you sort of know the answer to. It's not a competition. We had Sophie, who I still haven't talked into being on the podcast, Sophie Painter from Monash Physio. Sophie and it's not her idea, but she often brings up the concept of the learning zone versus the performance zone. And so this
Yeah.
80% or more of it you should always be in this learning zone where you can make mistakes, and you should be making mistakes. That includes asking a question you should know the answer to. And that can lead to a really interesting insight.
Yeah.
God, you don't have to know the whole point is learning.
Exactly.
A nice question is just, I know we've covered it. I'd really like to go over this again.
Yeah.
And the person next to you will say, oh, you'll be their hero because they're thinking the same thing.
That's right.
And they just were too shy to speak.
Yeah. And an example of that when I was uni was if I had something I didn't know and I was too afraid to ask, I would probably end up spending more time than I needed to looking for the answer when I could have just asked a fellow peer of mine or a lecturer of the answer. So that probably will save you a lot of time as well.
Yeah. And so working with peers, so working with each other, fellow students, you hear us saying that and you think, great, okay, fine, I'll do that. But that's a life skill to be able to work with people. You're currently working with Josh, a number of other senior clinicians, other people in your private practice. You're working community health and at the Alfred in the hospital. You're working with, you probably know hundreds of peers that you work with, if you count all the doctors and physios, everyone you work with. If you can't go and ask them a simple question, there's a problem. You have to just feel comfortable not knowing and asking, right?
Yeah. And I would say that's a skill I'm still trying to fine tune. Some people are a bit more intimidating than others. So that's something I'm trying to build the confidence to speak to everyone in my work setting, I would say.
Mm. So you're developing this broad experience in different settings, which is really good, and reflecting on that. And you've sort of come on here to share that with everyone, which we really appreciate. What about what we're talking about before we press record here, which is the advice you'd give to students and new grads in terms of who they should work for?
Of course.
This is probably not just limited to the private practice setting. But you were thinking about the things you've thought about regarding what sort of mentoring you want and what sort of environment you want to be working in. So
correct.
What's your thinking there?
So I'm probably at the moment, maybe, and I'm not too sure, speaking more from a private practice perspective. However, when I was looking for jobs and going for interviews, I guess there were a couple of things I would say for new grads to look out for. When I was a new grad, there were a lot of job postings that offered some new grad programs, so education, etc. However, I would say rather than being fully focused on that, I would say do your research into the physios at the clinic, what sort of experience they had, and whether or not you feel that you can learn from them. I think that's the most important, the clinicians that you work with, because even though they may offer you some education or some ongoing grad program, some of these things that they teach you, in my opinion, can be outdated. And I feel that it's better to learn from a clinician who is more experienced in that sense. So that's the first thing I looked out for, was who was working at the clinic. That was the first thing.
Interesting.
The other thing
a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing that I noticed as well as I was going for more interviews, and I guess I was quite shocked by this, but there were a number of interviews I went to where they didn't ask any questions about myself. What I meant by that is they never asked about what my long-term goals were, what I was looking for in a clinic, questions like that. Instead, they would just tell me about the clinic, what was on offer, whether or not it was suitable for me, and then they would offer me the job. So that was quite interesting for me. So I remember going for one interview which really stood out for me. Unfortunately, I didn't get the job, but it still sticks in my head to this day. And it was a 45-minute, 1 hour long interview. It was the only one of that kind that I've been to, but they really spent the time to try to get to know me. They were asking questions about my experience working so far as a physio, what was important to me in a work environment, what kept me engaged as a physiotherapist, what my long-term goals were. So the clinic was quite invested into seeing who they employed, which really impressed me. And I really wanted that job, which I was close to getting, but unfortunately I didn't. But I would say for new grads out there who go for interviews to look out for these things. If they're not as invested in you as you are in them, I feel like that's a little bit of a red flag in my opinion.
Mm. So of course we need to think about the practicalities and geographical location and the people, and you talked about the presentations, the people who will be coming to that clinic earlier.
Yeah.
And also the production value of what you're doing there. So is there a weekly, a program, a new grad program, and you have a weekly time to sit down and discuss? All of that's important. But what your advice here is it goes two ways. Think about the actual people there you'll be working with. And then from your perspective, how invested they would be in you personally. You exactly. do need to ask, you need to know who you're working with. And from a private practice owner's perspective, they want to work with people who have goals and who are going somewhere. They'd want to explore that as well. So
exactly.
Very interesting. Very good. What other advice should we sort of think about in terms of, so when I say we, what other advice do you think should young new grads and students think about when they're heading to the workplace?
The other dilemma which we talked about prior to recording the podcast was private practice or hospital.
There we go.
That was one of
That's the big debate point, isn't it, amongst students who are about to graduate? Yeah,
definitely. I guess we discussed the course itself had 3 years of emphasis on hospital, and naturally, most people would gravitate towards a hospital job. I remember I was sort of almost felt like I was missing out if I didn't apply for hospital jobs. So I almost was applying for hospital jobs because everyone else was applying for hospital jobs. Okay. But deep down, I knew I wanted to do private practice, and that's the route that I took. So my advice for people who feel like long-term that they see themselves in a private practice setting, to honestly go straight to private practice. And I know this might be somewhat controversial because some people say it's better to go to hospital first, but I think that it's better to go straight to private practice.
Yeah. So what, lots of follow-up questions there.
Of course.
Well, why? Tell us more.
Yeah,
Tell us more why that is.
I would say the biggest thing is the type of people and presentations that you see in a private practice setting, you won't get to see much of in a hospital setting. So if you spend a long time in a hospital setting and transition into a private practice, I feel you will struggle because you still haven't seen a lot of the presentations that you will see in a hospital setting, if that makes sense.
So the argument might be potentially you've got it depends where you work, depends who you're seeing, and depends how busy you are, of course, but there's a potential to get a wide variety of clinical conditions and still have that primary contact practitioner role where if someone comes in, you are screening them for their general health. And are they having a acute myocardial infarction? Are they having a stroke? Exactly. Or is this leg pain? Is this leg Correct. Pain coming from their calf? Is it Correct. Something that's related to their back? So you've got a lot of thinking that goes on.
That's right. And the other argument I would have as well is as a private practice practitioner, manual therapy is actually quite important. I know what we're taught in uni is that there's not much research behind it. However, I can tell you now it is quite an important aspect of private practice physio.
What makes it important from your perspective working with people?
People's expectations when they come in, to be honest. They come in, they sort of want to feel better and they're expecting some sort of manual therapy to go on to help them with that. So
it's a big part of it.
It's
the expectations. Yeah,
exactly. So being a private practice practitioner, you have to meet those expectations. Otherwise they won't come back. So manual therapy is a big part of it. And it's something you can't really do in a hospital setting. If someone comes in with back pain in a hospital setting, you can't really give them a mobe on a hospital bed, can you? So,
and there's
we sort
outpatients
of,
as well, and there's other public health, but
yes,
it is different, and the way that you would approach and you might handle those expectations might be different.
exactly right. Exactly. So, yeah, I would say that would be my advice. If you're looking to private practice in the future, I would advise you to go straight into it. However, there are still skills you can learn in a hospital setting, which is highly applicable in a private practice setting.
So this is a really nice conversation because it's balancing other conversations we've had. So Izzy Smith, who came on earlier, and she talked about so we're talking about the pros and cons of private practice and hospital work. She talked about some of those benefits of going straight into the hospital as well.
Mm-hmm.
There's obviously benefits to both.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Which it's like a debate. If you pitch one, as you know, have a bit of a false dichotomy on purpose, and we'll pitch one against the other, and you're doing both. So you're working at the Alfred as well.
Yeah.
How do you find that work, and what are you doing there?
Honestly, I love it there. I'm working as a Musk weekend physio at the Alfred, and it's
so this
really
is a big hospital in the centre of Melbourne,
correct.
And very different from your rural private practice experience.
Yeah, and it's very
non-metro, I should say.
Yeah, very very busy there as well. But I did all my placements at the Alfred, so it was good to be back at the Alfred as a physiotherapist this time, not a student. So it was good, and I'd say it has really helped me as a private practice physio as well.
Mm. And well, what helps you the most? So what skills and knowledge do you pick up working there, doing your weekend work? Is that an orthopedic?
Orthopedic, correct.
Mainly, but there's no such thing as just orthopedic. People come in with all sorts of comorbidities, but what do you take away from your work at the Alfred there in the hospital into your private work?
Yeah, so from starting off in private and then doing hospital work in the side, it's helped me because it can really help you build that patient rapport. A lot of my patients I see in a private practice setting, they come straight from the hospital. And once they know that you have experience working in a hospital and you know what they've been through, it really helps you as a practitioner to build that relationship because they know that you know all the struggles they've already been through in the hospital. So that's really helped me. That's the biggest thing I got out of it, working in a hospital setting.
It's not so much knowledge as much as connecting with a person and having that rapport, and they know that you know. That's
right. You do learn a lot of things in hospital as well, from a medical perspective, reading imaging, and also refreshing your other cardio and neuro knowledge as well, because you get patients with comorbidities which you have to manage. So that's all a good refresher for me as well.
So it seems, if I'm trying to preemptively answer my question I ask everyone, what are the most important foundational knowledge and skills for a physiotherapist? That the ability to develop rapport with different people in your communication is something that's really important to you. Because if you don't connect with someone, it doesn't matter where you're working,
100%.
It will cause problems, whether that's the person from a private business perspective going on seeing someone else, that's the reality of that work, or whether it's them not telling you something when you're in a clinical consultation, something important that they fail to mention because they don't trust you. So rapport is so important. You know, you're a person I can talk to for hours here. You can see that you've developed your communication skills inside and outside your career. And that's something that is a big strength of yours. What else? What other foundational skills and knowledge do you think are really important? And perhaps this is something that our students listening can think about as they're developing those.
From what perspective? Sorry, Luke.
So foundational skills, and I often think of things you might have learnt in university. So foundational basic science and all the anatomy and physiology and everything that you take forward.
Yeah.
And quite often the communication skills come up, but also it could be anything that I'll ask the question differently this week. What in your toolbox as a physiotherapist, What are the most important things that you use and you can't go to work without that help patients?
Ooh, that's a tough question, Luke. Um, so we discussed about how communication is quite important already, but I would say while you're in university, use the resources and the time available to build your own style of practice, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So what I mean by that is the uni gives you resources, the basic foundation on how to conduct assessments, your interview, your treatment, and things like that. But use the time during practicals to sort of build your own style of practice before you go into working as a practitioner. And that's something you'll continue to build over time with work experience as well. But start thinking about this as a student, I would say.
Great. Okay. I love it. You're developing your style as a part of the foundation of not only who you are as a professional, but as a person.
Correct.
And so we're all different. And when I go to see Jun and you've got your style, this is not only sort of the way you think about things and the way you practice, but I know who you are as a person as well. And you're bringing yourself into there, because there's nothing worse than talking to anybody and they seem to be doing things robotically and they're not connecting with it. Yeah. And they know all the books and they know all the things, and you feel uncomfortable talking to them because they haven't found that way to connect with you.
Exactly. So
Ollie Wong talked about that as well.
Yeah.
He talked about developing the Ollie Wong that was in different roles.
That's right.
You would put the mask on. What did he say? I'll have to go back and re-listen to it. He had a nice way of saying that you develop that professional persona and bring that along.
Yeah.
And there's some comfort that comes from that. Correct. Knowing that you can go into that role and you don't have to know everything, but you develop that style. And
that's right. Yeah.
It's okay.
You'll find that once you develop your own style and you become more comfortable with it, that patients will be a lot more comfortable with connecting with you and building that rapport. So definitely start thinking about that and fine-tuning that as a student and continuing to build that as you get more work experience, I would say.
Beautiful. I love it. Where do you think you're going over the next 5 or 10 years? So you study? You're going to go to Adelaide, you mentioned.
Yes.
Tell us about your study. So there'll be plenty of people listening to this will be thinking about postgraduate training. What's next?
Yeah.
So what are you planning?
So my next stage is I've decided to study my master's in Musk up in Adelaide, which will be a full-time 1-year course.
Is that at University of South Australia or
Uni of South Australia? Isn't that where you're from, Luke?
That's where Suzanne was born and bred, in Adelaide.
Oh, wow.
And we both lived there and we both did that same master's course. So
yes.
Yeah.
So that will be interesting. And I guess the reason I decided to do that was, firstly, I knew I was going to do it at some stage as part of my career plan. It was just about when I wanted to do it. I personally thought that currently I've reached somewhat a learning plateau where I don't feel like I'm learning anymore, if that makes sense. And that's why I've decided to transition back into uni to study my postgrad, to continue that learning as a private practitioner, essentially.
And you mentioned the manual therapy skills as well, and University of South Australia has a history. Jeff Maitland and many who have followed there.
That's right.
That was actually, funnily enough, that was my same motivation to return to that master's.
Yeah,
the clinical reasoning framework and the manual therapy training.
Correct.
I actually just wanted to take a step back and go back and build up the basic building blocks of assessment and management.
Of course.
And I just wanted more information, more study. And so I guess I went in there looking for content.
Yes.
And I came out of it with a different way of thinking. It's the same with your PhD. You go into there thinking, well, you either go into it because you just sort of want to do it for a life adventure, or because it's strategy. You're going into that thinking, well, it's now entry level for an academic position, or I want to do research leadership in the health service, whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then if things go well, you leave with a a different way of thinking.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Just
And I'm hoping that's what I'll get out of the course as well, as you've discussed.
Yeah, and that you got that out of your undergrad course as well. I mean, can compare the way of approaching your study in year 12 or the end of high school versus now as a solo practitioner and someone working in teams. So you've got all these different skills in terms of where to look things up.
That's
in
right.
the last episode, Christian Osadnik, that's just gone to air, he talked about more and more the skill we really need is to be resource aware, he said.
Yeah.
So where you find things, and especially with all the amazing evidence summaries and online education you can get. So no doubt you mentioned that before. No doubt you spend a lot of time with those quite valuable. They're quite good resources. You can pay not much and you can get subscription based professional development, and it's amazing. But you also want to go back into the university and study for a year.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Nah, but I found compared to others, it might be different for others, but I learned quite well in a university setting. And when I was in the study zone, I got a lot out of it. So that was another reason why I decided to go back to uni rather than continue to work and gain more experience out of it, which is good. But I found I hit a bit of a learning plateau, as we talked about.
There's plenty more we could dig into here. I found a lot of that really relatable. I'm sure listeners will find parts of that really relatable as well, and very honest as well. That there's plenty we could dig into in the future if we do this again. Yeah, particularly around the way, the depth into which we go into things in university. It isn't by accident.
No, it's not.
And there's no shortage of people with opinions on what should be added into a university degree, but I've never had a first year student tell me that there was too little content as well. So it's sort of what you've covered really nicely there isn't just about the content, but it's your approach to it.
Correct.
And you said you enjoyed going to uni, and that's great, and enjoyed studying, and because learning is really fun. Yeah. That's why you're going back. But if you don't have a method of learning and learn how to learn, then you are going to have trouble when you're a new graduate, because that's what you do on your own now. You got to learn. You go out there and learn how to learn. And so there's so much that you've offered there for listeners, perhaps at the student level and the new graduate level, who are not only thinking about what they're doing and reflecting on that, but thinking about what they're doing next. So we'll have to come back and talk about your master's and how that went. I'll be interested to say hello to everyone at UniSA from Susanna and I. And when you definitely doing it? You're definitely signing up?
Yes. I got the accommodation, everything sorted out. Due to move there next month. I'm looking forward to it.
Good luck. That's excellent. Yeah. We'll have to follow up on that, because I think there's another whole series of discussions we can have on approaching postgraduate study and the relevance of that and when you would do it. Yeah. So anything else you wanted to add any final thoughts?
I would say just a quick summary about, what we talked about. And I know these are very common terms in uni. One of the most common ones you get is P's get degrees and fake it till you make it. Right. Those are two of the most common phrases I've heard. And honestly, there's some truth to an extent, but I would say, although P's do get degrees, you get as much as you put into it in uni. So, the more work you put into it, the more prepared you'll feel when you get out of uni. And same as when you're a practitioner, you can fake it till you make it, but you can only do that to some extent. And the more work you put into it, the more success you'll get as a physio, I would say.
No, that's a really important point. And it's a balance between effort you're putting in and how your health and your own stress as well. So I always think of someone who gets 55% in an anatomy assessment, and then you see them 10 years later, and they're an excellent clinician. And not only did they have other strengths, including relating to people and being a good clinician. But don't forget that there is time, and if that same person may be doing their masters like you're doing soon, and they may be now they may be the student who's now getting 95% in there, and you go through different stages of your life when you're ready for for things and when you're better at things, and it might be just that stage you're at. I'm not saying go and just aim for your P to get your degree and just shoot for the bottom or shoot for the bare pass and get your 55%. But maybe there's a balance in between stressing yourself to the point that you don't even enjoy university because you have to get 100% on everything, and just sort of understanding why assessments are there. In our course, that is it's an entry to practice degree. You can do a master's, sure, you can do a PhD, but the point is you finish it and then you go and practice and your career begins. There's nothing after that.
That's right.
And the whole point of it is to get good at being a professional. It's not to get marks. Of course, you can use marks to apply for positions and a PhD and everything, but it has to be in balance. And for some, it gets really out of balance. They get really lost in the weeds, and they really lose perspective about why you're doing an assessment. It's a competency assessment. It's the whole point of it is this person that got 55% in anatomy, okay, they've got room for improvement. They'll do their masters like you are one day, and they'll do postgrad study, but they're, it's just the beginning.
That's right. Yeah. And I would say, in first year, I wasn't the brightest of the bunch. I remember in one of the practicals, I failed one of the stations because I couldn't figure out how to turn on the ultrasound machine. Oh,
thankfully we don't have that. Yeah, things evolve, and the students don't get assessed on ultrasound.
Yeah, so I'd say I've come a long way from that. So there's hope for everyone.
There are people out there who don't really ask me; they tell me what we teach in university. It's a bugbear of mine, and they tell me that we'd still teach you guys 4 months of electrotherapy, and we don't.
No, not anymore.
There's things are evolving all the time, but
that's right.
Yeah, back then you did have that as a competency. It's sort of it's taught in other ways now. It's not taught. The main thing there in those stations is effective communication, exercise, patient education, taking an interview, manual therapy skills, exercise prescription skills, but try to cut out some of the less evidence-based stuff. But anyway, but so that is funny though. So you couldn't turn on a machine. And did you lose sleep over that and go, maybe I didn't get 100%, and so therefore I can't be a good physiotherapist?
Look, it was more embarrassing than anything. It was in front of Mick, so and I spent the whole time trying to figure out how to turn it on. So I definitely failed that station.
Oh my God. Yeah, that's not a good experience. Yeah. Yeah. But apart from that, you really enjoyed university. And,
definitely did. Yeah.
Did really well, and here you are now. So we should reconnect again and come back and sort of see how you went with your masters. But for everyone listening, we really appreciate you joining us in these conversations. You might be on here next talking to me. So make sure you let me know if you want to come on and have a conversation. We hope you're getting a lot out of it. So thanks very much, Jun, and good luck with the masters.
No problem. Thank you so much, Luke.
So until next time, this is Jun and Luke wishing you all the very best with your studying, professional development, and lifelong learning.